could we say that 1,000 years ago there was a different kind of focusing, a different kind of pattern that they would have and that they shared? The earth was flat at the time. The question behind it is, are we creating this reality? Are we?
You see, 2,000 years ago, presumably, people perceived the world in the same way that we perceive it now. As far as we know, 2,000 years is a very short amount of time. So their perceptions were the same, but their interpretation of their perceptions was different. They interpreted their perception as the flat earth. So the idea of a flat earth was an interpretation of a perception. And then that, at a certain stage, that interpretation, that model, no longer worked because their knowledge expanded. So the model, the prevailing paradigm, could no longer accommodate their expanding knowledge. The prevailing paradigm had to crack, it had to break and be replaced by a larger model, a paradigm that was more able to accommodate their expanding knowledge. And then it happened again when they realized, no, it's not a geocentric, the earth is not the center of the universe, that the sun is. Again, the prevailing paradigm that had served humanity very well up until then. Humanity had been able to do all it wanted to do up until the middle of the 16th century. And then the geocentric model was too small to accommodate humanity's expanding knowledge. So again, the paradigm cracked, and we had to have a larger model. The sun is the center of our universe. And we have now got to another crisis moment where our model, our materialistic model, which has served humanity reasonably well, provided incredible medicine, computer, aviation, etc. This materialistic model that has, in some respects, served humanity very, very well, is no longer able to accommodate our expanding knowledge. It has to crack. And in fact, it is cracking. Look around. Look at the world. Look at what's happening in the world. Look at the institutions that are crumbling. Look at the conflict between nations. These are the signs that our paradigm can no longer accommodate our knowledge. So the prevailing paradigm has to crack and give way to a larger idea. Then this larger idea, I would suggest, is the consciousness-only model. And scientists are onto it. They have taken a slight U-turn. Not a U-turn, they've taken a slight... they've gone up a cul-de-sac, in my opinion. At the turn of the last century, the founders of quantum physics, Max Planck and Niels Bohr, and all these people realized that observation plays a part, affects the observed. So this was the first time when scientists said that observation, that is mind or consciousness, has something to do with the state of physical reality. So there was this admission that there is a connection between mind and matter. And then this idea went underground for most of the last century. But now it has resurfaced again. Consciousness again is on the map in a big way for scientists with this question, the hard problem of consciousness. How does consciousness come out of matter? And the way they think, most scientists that are interested in consciousness, the way they think at the moment, the way they reason is this. They notice that we are conscious. We experience. We perceive the world. So humans are obviously conscious. We notice also that when we tread on our cat's paw, it screeches. So presumably the cat feels experience, therefore the cat must be conscious. So not only humans have consciousness, but cats and dogs and chickens and fishes. When you fish them out of the water, they don't like it. When you see them, flapping on the decks when they're being taken out of their nets, they definitely don't like it. So they must be feeling something. So we keep going down, and the question that scientists ask is, where do we draw the line? Where can we say that all creatures on this side of the line are conscious, but creatures on the other side of the line aren't? In other words, when does matter become conscious? And the line is moving. Can we say that amoebas, for instance, they move towards certain environments and away from other kinds of environments? So there must be a modicum of consciousness in an amoeba. Plants also are attracted towards the sun. So can we say that plants have a degree of consciousness? So this is the way the thinking is going. And the line is shifting more, and now the new idea is that everything has a degree of consciousness. It's called Panpsychism. Pan in Greek meaning all or everything, and psyche meaning mind. In other words, everything has mind, or everything has consciousness. And the conclusion of this way of thinking is that the universe is conscious. And this is considered to be equivalent to the non-dual understanding. Consciousness pervades everything, but it is not. It is a misunderstanding. It is panpsychism. It's a form of materialism, because the mistake is right at the very beginning. The mistake is, I, the body, am conscious. This is where the scientist starts. It is the body, it is I, the body, that am aware. It is me, this body, that is aware of this room. Once you start there, you're building your house on sand. Everything you think downstream, sorry, I'm mixing my metaphors there. Everything you think after that initial thought is going to contain the original mistake within it. If we think either body is conscious, then we're going to think dogs are conscious. Then we're going to think cats are conscious. Then chickens and fishes and amoebas and plants and cars and pavements and lampposts and houses. And eventually we'll think the universe is conscious. No, the universe is not conscious. Lampposts are not conscious. Computers are not conscious and never will be. Amoebas and flowers and dogs and cats and human beings are not conscious. Only consciousness is conscious. Only awareness is aware. And this, science at the moment has gone down a cul-de-sac of panpsychism and come to this conclusion: the universe is conscious. So at some stage they'll discover that it's a cul-de-sac. They'll come back to the original assumption, I, the body, am aware. And they'll explore the experience. Who is it that is aware? It is not the body that is aware, it is awareness that is aware. And then if they start building their model on that fact of experience, as we have been here, that's what we've been doing. We've started with the fundamental fact of experience. Awareness is aware, and we've built our model on that, and showing that everything that appears in awareness, is known by awareness, and is made of awareness. So when we hear things like everything is pervaded by consciousness, and we even read this in the Bhagavad Gita, everything is pervaded by awareness. It is a statement like that is a concession. In the case of panpsychism, it's just a misunderstanding. But in the Bhagavad Gita, they knew better. So why, we might ask, did they make statements like, everything is pervaded by awareness? It's a concession to the mind that believes there are a multiplicity and diversity of things. As a concession to that belief, we can say all those things are pervaded by consciousness. But everything is not pervaded by consciousness. There are no things to be pervaded by consciousness. No one would ever say the landscape in a movie is pervaded by the screen. There is no such thing as a landscape to be pervaded by the screen. There is just the screen, which is modulating itself as the landscape. So the universe is not conscious, and it is not pervaded by consciousness. There is just consciousness, which appears to itself as the universe.
Thank you. And please don't misunderstand. I think your models are just great, and I love working with them. That's why these questions arise.
And likewise, please don't misunderstand me either. I know I know well your deep love of truth, and I respect your questioning, and you should question, and you should doubt. You should doubt everything I say, and anything that I say that doesn't stand the scrutiny of experience, you should call me on it. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said as a concession, a compassionate concession to people that believe in the outside world. To those people, as a compassionate concession, the teaching says the outside world is full of God's presence. And it's a legitimate thing to say. The outside world is full of consciousness. But for the scientists who are really trying to build an accurate model, it's not legitimate to say that. We have to be, because the scientists are not being poetic. We can say it poetically, and I'm sure I've said a number of times this week, everything is pervaded by. Feel that the sensation is pervaded. I said it this morning, I'm sure. Feel that the sensation is pervaded or saturated by loving emptiness. I'm being poetic. I'm relying on your understanding because I've already taken time to give you the context. I don't literally mean there is something called a sensation pervaded or saturated by consciousness, but in the context of I'm taking poetic license. I would suggest that this consciousness-only paradigm, when it is for many people, and I know that we are not die-hard materialists here, but when the materialist paradigm is met with the consciousness-only paradigm, that the mind, our minds, even those of us that have been studying the non-dual perspective for decades, there is a residue of materialist thinking that remains in the mind, even after years of non-dual practice, and that some of the ideas that are implicit in the consciousness-only model provoke such resistance in our minds. And if we just explore those ideas openly, we're open to the possibility. We don't have to be convinced, we don't have to agree, but just if we're open to this other possibility, each time we explore it, it begins to fill out. It becomes more plausible. And it's been my experience that the whole picture fills out more and more and more until at some stage there is a kind of shift where our center of gravity is the consciousness-only model. That becomes as clear to us as the materialist model used to be. And suddenly it's like filling in a jigsaw puzzle. To begin with, it's just a chaos of pieces and you just get the corners and the edges. But a certain time comes when there's more coherent picture than there is empty space. Suddenly it begins to make sense. And the more you fill it in, the simpler it gets. To begin with, you start with 1,000 pieces, but the more you fill in, there's less and less, until the end there's just one picture. And that's how, in my experience, the consciousness-only model starts as a possibility. It challenges the the materialist presumptions, and it begins to make more and more sense. We test it in our experience. It conforms to and confirms our experience. And the picture fills out until at some stage there's this sense, it makes complete sense. Nothing needs to be denied about the world. Physics, science as it is today doesn't need to be denied. It's just given a broader context in which to operate.
Yeah, that makes sense to give a chance to this new view.
Yes.
Without creating a new belief.
Absolutely.
To say, yeah, Rupert had said it's
the last thing I want anyone to do is to go away with a new belief in the consciousness-only model. In fact, if you were erring, should you believe what I'm suggesting or should you not, I would strongly recommend you don't believe it. In fact, I would feel that I had failed at my job if any of you went away with a new non-dual belief. The only thing I ask everyone to agree on, it's like we have to agree on, we have to start somewhere. All I ask is that we agree that experience must be the test of reality. That's the only thing I ask.
That's why I'm here.
Perfect. And then what I'm trying to do is to mix experience and philosophy, to suggest ideas, but then we're not interested in philosophy. We're interested in experience. So then I provide these experiential ways of testing the ideas, just like a scientist does, make a hypothesis and then test the hypotheses in our experience. So it's this blend of pondering, considering, contemplating our experience, thinking about it, and then testing our experience. Have I ever actually experienced the past? All my life I have presumed there is a past. Have I ever actually been there? Well, let's try. Let's try now and step out of the present and go. So it's a mixture. Ask yourself the question, am I aware? All these, it's a mixture between these very experiential means and then try to formulate ideas that are based on experience. So, and that I feel is the true philosophy, the philosophy that is, it's what Krishna Menon meant by, the term he used was higher reasoning. By higher reasoning, he meant reason that is derived from experience rather than belief. And in fact, this is the way the Vedantic teaching was always taught. It's this rigorous analytical exploration of experience, and then these very experiential explorations. And there's a combination. The Vedantic teaching was always a combination of both. Bob realizes that everything he knows, all his experience, or all his knowledge and experience, is refracted through the prism of his mind. He cannot be sure that what he sees out there is an external world made out of matter, because it's all filtered through thought and perception. So Bob has this recognition. Until I know the nature of my mind, until I know what is true about my mind, I cannot know anything that is true about the world that I perceive. So Bob has this incredible recognition that there can be nothing more interesting or important than to know the nature of my mind. I cannot know what anything is until I know the nature of my mind. And so at that moment, Bob's mind turns away from the objects of thought and perception, and it asks itself, what is the essential nature of my mind? What is my mind made of? It's obviously not made of thoughts, because thoughts are always coming and going, but my mind is always present. It cannot be made of perceptions or feelings or sensations, because these are always coming and going. But there is one element of my mind, there's an essential, irreducible element of my mind that is constant. That must be what the mind is made of. And thinking like this, Bob's mind is tracing it doesn't realize it, but Bob's mind is tracing its way back to its essential, irreducible nature. And then there is this recognition at some point that consciousness is the fundamental nature of my mind. And then we begin to ponder the nature of consciousness, or of course it is consciousness that does the pondering. Consciousness, as it were, looks at itself. We are conscious of being conscious, aware of being aware. And there is this recognition that just in the experience of being aware itself, there are no limitations. I cannot get to the edge or the end of being aware. The experience of being aware cannot be divided up. It is a seamless, infinite, indivisible, ever-present whole. That is the recognition. What I am is eternal and infinite. And then we go back to the experience of the world, and we realize that the world that we once thought took place outside of ourselves is an appearance within this ever-present, unlimited consciousness. And everything that appears in consciousness is made of consciousness. And that's the recognition. Everything that I experience is God's infinite being in religious language, or in the language we use here is the activity of consciousness. A modulation or colouring, a self-colouring of consciousness.
But from that recognition of aware of being aware, there would still seem to be a deconstruction process to go through for the mind and body.
Yes, exactly. So that there is one thing. The first step, the recognition, I am awareness. The second step, the recognition of the infinite nature of awareness. And then the third step, those first two steps are both part of the inward-facing path, the Vedantic path. The mind tracing inwards. And then the third step is this is the Tantric, or the outward-facing path, the realignment of all aspects of our experience with this new understanding. There has been this recognition. What I essentially am is infinite consciousness. And all my experience, and so then we begin to explore experience, objective experience, and we realize it all takes place not to consciousness, but in consciousness. And then not just in consciousness, but as consciousness. So there is a gradual realigning of the way we think, feel, act, perceive, and relate with this new understanding. This is the process that takes place after the recognition of our true nature. And that was the part of this teaching what I was earlier calling the Tantric approach, the approach that includes all objective experience, whereas the Vedantic approach, the inward-facing path, starts by excluding all experience and just focusing inwards. I don't mean inwards onto the body, I mean inwards towards the essential nature of mind. So yes, it's important that, as you say, Bob has some habits of thinking, feeling, acting, perceiving and relating have developed over 66 years. And these habits outlive the recognition of our true nature. If you had been on a progressive path and spent 40 years doing preliminary practices, then a certain number of these habits would have been realigned along the way before you met the direct path teachings. And that may be the case in your case. I don't know, but even if we have, after the recognition of our true nature, for all of us, there are habits in the way we think, habits in the way we feel, the way we sense the body, habits, the way we relate with one another, the way we perceive the world, that are still running on the old paradigm. And it's amazing to... It's very easy. I hear this sometimes. That it's obvious that what I essentially am is unlimited awareness, and everything appears in that and is made of that. But it's not just a one-time recognition. The mind, there are layers and layers and layers and layers of habit in the mind and in the body. And it's my experience that these layers are gradually exposed to the light of awareness. I find now that my mind is constantly being illuminated by fresh understanding. That this understanding takes time to deeply penetrate the old structures of thinking and feeling. It continues to fill out and reveal itself and to colonize our experience. Not just our feeling, but even our thinking. In fact, I don't think we can ever say this colonization or permeation of our experience by the light of awareness ever comes to an end. I hope it doesn't.